Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graben. Our guest today is Jonathan Bailey. He is the founder of plagiarismtoday.com. He's also a copyright and plagiarism consultant at Copybyte. He's got a background in education in journalism. Jonathan has spoken at conferences all over the world. That's how I was first introduced to his work. It was at a WordPress blog conference in Dallas over a decade ago. So I've been following his work since then. He's also spoken at four of the International Plagiarism Conferences, 3 South by Southwest conferences, and a lot more. He's been featured in publications including the Boston Globe, the Guardian, PBS, the New York Times, and the BBC. So Jonathan, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm apologizing that I'm a little bit dim today. It's because usually I rely on the beautiful natural New Orleans light to illuminate me, but today I'm waiting for an impending hurricane, so I get to be a little bit in the dark today. I apologize for that.
Well, you're going to shed light on some important issues for our listeners, but I hope everything is going to be okay with the coming storm.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
No.
So
we should be fine. I'm not too worried about it. It's just, like I said, I have great timing. That's what I've learned.
Well, you've been living in New Orleans with Katrina and other hurricanes. Have you had to evacuate or?
Yeah, I've been here since 2002. So yeah.
Well, we'll hope for the best for you and everyone there in New Orleans. There's a lot to talk about today. Issues of copyright infringement and bad practices on the internet, things mistakes people might make because of maybe ignorance of the law around that and plagiarism. So I'm excited to explore all of that. But first off, as we always do, Jonathan, I'm curious to hear your answer to the main question. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake happened fairly early in my career. I started Plagiarism Today in 2005. About 2008, I went full time with it, doing consulting work, expert witness work. And when it started off really, really well. Because I'd kind of like dipped my toe into it. I had clients lined up. I was doing great. I was very busy, making good money. And then, as it sometimes happens, like everyone cut out at once. One case I've been working on ended, another client was shutting down, and I went from basically completely booked up to functionally nothing. And then I got approached by a company named, Copybyte, which you might remember from the intro. Basically, they wanted to hire me exclusively to work on their product, and they were underneath a content creation company. This company, basically what they do is they provide turnkey websites to a specific type of doctor or physician. And the whole idea was Copybyte was like their enforcement arm. And they wanted to hire me full time, and they offered me a very, very decent salary for it. It was very good money, I'll admit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a mistake for two reasons. One was that I made the decision out of fear. And I don't believe you should make a decision out of fear. Fear is why you set up backup plans. Fear is why you put up contingencies. It's not why you make a career decision. And this was a very career decision. It was calling for exclusivity. I'd have to fire the clients I had left. And basically it was going to start me over with a full-time job and traditional work. And the other reason it was a mistake is, even though I think they're a fine company and fine people, I have no ethical qualms with them. But we're very different business-minded. I'm very much building long-term things. I like doing things that last 10, 15, 20 years. PT itself Plagiarism Today will be turning 20 next year, for example. I'm very much the long-term guy, and these guys were very traditional business, quarter to quarter to quarter, and it's just two totally different mindsets. Both are fine, but there's two different mindsets, so it's hard for us to get along. And it actually worked pretty well. I knew my targets. I knew what I had to do. And I, for about 6 months or so, it all went very, very well. And then I don't know what happened. I know some of it was the economic downturn from around that time. Some of it
Mhm.
was they had a product they invested a lot into that I don't think ever launched. And I know there were some other issues, but basically it went from, hey, everything's great to, by the way, now you're fired.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
like overnight.
Yikes.
And they offered me a severance package choice. And the choice was either about 2 or 3 months' salary, somewhere in that range, or I could just take all the copyright intellectual property, the name, the domain, the trademarks, the logos, the site, everything, and just go off with it.
Mhm.
And I talked it over with my girlfriend, and I said, I got into this mess because I didn't bet on myself. I'm
Mhm.
not going to do that
Yeah.
twice. So I opted for the name, took it, and it's
Mhm.
been a consulting firm, then that side of it now for almost, it's over 12 years, almost 15 years now. And it has been very
Yeah.
good to me. It has helped me get a lot of money. It helped me have a lot of success, actually. I'm very grateful that I made that decision because I definitely made more than a few months' salary off of it in the time
Yeah.
since.
Yeah. That's, I mean, that's a great example of learning from a mistake. Like you said, learning from the mistake or, regret of not betting on yourself. And I mean, what an unusual twist to go from they're laying you off to then it becomes your company,
Yeah, I mean,
or at least,
yeah, I mean, I went from being, like I said, the employee, I did the basically the bottom guy on whatever totem pole there is, to owning it
Mhm.
and having it completely under my name. I went from just agent to CEO, owner, president, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
And it's still largely just me. I have people I bring in for larger projects, but it's still very much just me because I'm such a control freak at the end of the day. I have
Yeah.
trouble people, especially people I don't know, help me with things. That's always been an issue with me, and another reason why I probably shouldn't have taken a traditional job.
Yeah. But hey, you have to know yourself, and it sounds like you're preventing, or you've got the awareness. It would be a mistake to try to grow the firm to 20 people, yet alone two.
Yeah,
You're
exactly. I have found my happy point, and
Yeah.
I think that's about where I am because I have the flexibility to do the things that I want to do. I'm very lucky. I have a family that other people here are also well off and doing well. So yeah, I mean, it's a situation where I don't need to focus on growing this company and hiring people. I need to focus on doing the work I have in front of me and just, filling out the hours of my day doing exactly what I want to be doing, which is thinking about and analyzing copyright, plagiarism, and related issues.
Yeah. Well, I love the story, and I'm sure you've thought through the what ifs if you hadn't bet on yourself that second time, if you had taken the
Mm.
severance and
Yeah,
yeah, would you dodged a bullet there, I guess,
yeah,
right?
I definitely did. It's difficult to turn down money, especially when the checks have a lot of zeros. But
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes you got to learn when to say no.
Yeah. Well, so I'd love to dig into that work, that you mentioned in
Yeah.
these different terms. And, I think everyone knows the word plagiarism. We have to double check how to spell it sometimes, perhaps.
Don't worry,
But
I purchased a bunch of the misspelled domains too. So if you screw it up, plagiarism, you'll still end up there. It's all good.
that's smart. Because people trying to find you are going to make mistakes.
Yep.
What's your best definition of plagiarism, whether that's applied to an academic setting or in a business context?
Well, broadly speaking, plagiarism is the use of another person's work, ideas, words, images, material, um, without proper attribution. Um, and proper attribution means different things in different settings, but without proper attribution is the way I phrase it. It's more about the citation and the identifying of the source than it is the copying itself per se,
Mhm.
which is why I
Yeah.
like to say copyright and plagiarism overlap, but they aren't the same thing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and getting to that point though, like citation standards vary wildly from place to place. If
Mhm.
you cited your Facebook post the same way you cited an academic paper,
Yeah.
people look at you like you're weird as hell because you would be.
Yeah.
that,
Right.
that's incredibly strange. Don't
Yeah.
do that. So the standards vary from place to place. Some places attribution is not expected at all. That seems to be true with a lot of memes and a lot of social media sharing. In some places, the attribution standards are very strict. Once again, going back to academic research. And there are places that kind of exist in between, like YouTube videos and blog posts. So, yeah, but it's all about the standard of whatever space you're in at the time.
So it seems like there are some cases that might be really cut and dry. Someone copies and pastes 2 paragraphs from a journal article. Those exact words end up in their journal article. I'm curious to learn more about the gray area where you talk about using somebody's ideas.
Yeah.
Like, is there a question of like too close? The paraphrasing is too close, or just say, hey, someone had a novel idea. You should cite the idea, even if you're describing it in different words.
Yeah. Well, we'll start with the paraphrasing part. That's the easiest to dive into. With paraphrasing, one thing that a lot of people don't fully understand is that when you paraphrase something, you're not supposed to use their words at all. Basically, you're supposed to start from a blank screen, type your own paragraph. And the way my teachers taught me it way back when I was a youngling, back in the 1800s, was they basically said, read the text here, turn it over, and then write it. And I realized today that was teaching me to write in a clean room environment where you're not looking at the material. And that helped me a lot when learning how to paraphrase. If you try to take someone else's words and edit it and quote unquote make it your own,
right,
you're never going to succeed. And if you do succeed, you'll take way longer than just writing yourself. People, it's always been strange to me how people seem to not care about how long it takes to edit something, but freak out about how long it takes to write something. It's the same amount as time. Time is time. But regardless, that's the thing about paraphrasing. It should be their ideas, but your words is the whole idea. And of course, you still normally cite the idea from, and that gets to the point of ideas. Idea plagiarism can be so incredibly difficult, because how do I prove that I had a unique and original idea that was wholly mine, and that nobody else could have ever thought of it? That is damn near impossible to prove. And there's very few ideas, I think, by themselves that are that unique. Information, I think, is something that does, you can track a little bit easier, because with information, you can say, well, this is the only source for these particular facts. Therefore, I'm assuming, it's therefore it almost certainly came from there. But ideas can be incredibly difficult to prove. Now, that said, some ideas are so popular and so uniquely known to one person. And, a good example would be if, I wanted to have a movie about a farmer boy on an alien planet who goes off to become the chosen one and fights with these weird lightning swords. I think you might know where I got the idea from. You might be able to make a guess. It might not be copyright infringement, but you might be able to figure out where that idea came from. So there are ideas like that. But but one of the things I see in movies all the time is like writer X will sue big name Hollywood production saying, I came up with that idea for that movie. I came up with the idea for, I don't know, Deadpool versus Wolverine. Not that that's a good example, but I came up with the idea for that. And it's like, you can't prove that because it's totally possible 2 people came up with the same idea of having those 2 characters meet. I don't think it's, and in fact, I'm pretty sure everyone wanted that, but
right. Well, you're making me think of one of, are you a Simpsons fan?
Yes.
So there's a scene where Principal Skinner is in the Quickie Mart, and he's telling Apu about his idea for a novel. And I had to do a quick search here to try to get this right. It's an amusement park with dinosaurs, and I call it Billy and the Clonosaurus. And then Apu like yells at him for a really long time about the plagiarism.
Yeah, that's just Jurassic Park. Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, honestly, Jurassic Park is a terrible idea for a theme park, but yeah, exactly. I mean, it's entirely possible he came up with that idea on his own. He might not have. I mean, I guess you could have avoided Jurassic Park your whole life. I've got friends that have never seen a Star Wars film, so I guess it's possible.
Right.
But still, yeah, that's the thing. There are some ideas that are so out there and so identified with one entity, but
Right.
other ideas that are more generic, like going back to Star Wars. Star Wars itself is based upon the hero's journey
Mm-hmm.
of rising to the call, rejecting the call, falling. The whole
It's
arc
just
there.
story structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole story structure has been done a million times. It's literally ancient.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's pretty much free game for anyone else to use. You
Yeah.
probably should. I mean, there's a reason it's considered a classic structure. It's a very good.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, obviously that wouldn't be plagiarism, for example. And like I said, that's why ideas are so difficult, is because proving that someone definitely plagiarized an idea is often very, very difficult to do, and oftentimes not enforceable. Almost always not enforceable either.
Yeah. So I know from your background, I'm curious to hear your story here of kind of inspiration for starting Plagiarism Today has origins in you having some literary work plagiarized.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the genesis for plagiarism, they began in like 2002. I want to say because I was a writer at the time. I've had websites since 1995. For the record, I've been on the internet now. I'm going to be celebrating my 30th year of internet
Yeah.
of running websites and having web development projects. Um, but in 2002, I was holding a chat with some readers on my website, and it was going well. And someone asked, "Hey, do you run another website?" And I'm like, no, 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 it's just the one. And I kind of ignored it and moved on. And then he dropped me a link to the site, and it was someone who had just literally taken darn near everything on my site and put it underneath his name.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have flipped out a little bit. I might have
Well,
lost it.
that's understandable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so, especially the first time it happened. And I was lucky because I come from that journalism and mass media background, and mass media law was an area I was already fascinated in. So I knew I had rights. I knew what the law said I could, that I had here, but the practicality of how to enforce it, I didn't know. So
Yeah.
I got good. I hit the books. And after I took care of that case, Crystal, my girlfriend, who is a repeated figure in these stories, says, well, if one person could do it, why couldn't others? And so we
Yeah.
started developing search techniques to find it. And we ended up, over the course of the next few years, finding 700 other people who had done very similar things.
Yeah.
Sometimes just one item, sometimes a bunch. And it was just incredible. I could not believe how common this was. And what happened was in 2005, I started getting interested in RSS reading because it was
Mhm.
2005. We all were. And I wanted
Yeah.
a site about hunting down, finding, and stopping plagiarism to talk about this intersection of content misuse. And it didn't exist. And once again, Crystal speaks up and says, well, you do websites, you write, why don't you make it?
Right.
And okay, what the heck? I'll give it a shot. And
Yeah.
once again, talking about bad timing, I launched it in August 2005, which was the month of Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
We had that conversation earlier. So basically, I considered a Katrina baby. While I was evacuated, it kept me from going insane during those
Sure.
weeks after the storm. And basically, I started building an audience. Things grew, and people started asking me for help. And then it evolved to people paying me money to help them. And it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of snowballed organically until I was doing it part time. And then after I had my last, other than copyright, my last quote unquote real job,
Mm-hmm.
once that ended, I went full time with it. And other than that 6-month hiatus with copyright we talked about, I've been full time with it ever since.
Yeah. So I've got a question. Some listeners might be in the same situation. So I also started leanblog.org. It's been my main home and blog online in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Where the same internet generation, I HTML coded some web pages in 1994, 1995 for fun. But the problem that I've run across is other websites that just wholesale copy and paste my blog content into their websites. And I've stopped putting full posts into the RSS feed, and look, people find a way other than putting the whole website behind a password, which would be counterproductive. I get a ping back, from
Yeah.
some site like, you're copying it, There's usually no clear way to contact them, no clear owner of the site. I leave a comment saying, "Hey, you're infringing on my work. I demand you take this down." I mean, what advice would you have for me or someone else in that situation?
The main thing that people in that situation need to know, if your work is being infringed on other sites, you need to understand the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA.
Mm-hmm.
And most people are familiar with it in the context of YouTube and the copyright strike system there. That's kind of where most people get their daily exposure to it these days. But the truth is, it applies to all websites, all web hosts that are in the United States. And there's very similar rules in like Australia, the European Union, and elsewhere. It's just the DMCA is the easiest to follow, A, because most sites do have some kind of American connection, most hosts do. And also, it's kind of become the de facto standard in other countries as well. And the idea is, basically, in that situation, don't I was like you. I would try to reach out. I would try to reach out to the person running the site. I would try to leave comments and do those things. And what that got was a lot of people basically doing the digital equivalent of flipping me the bird.
Yeah.
I got a lot of anger, a lot of hostility, and not a lot of take you down. So what I ended up doing was I learned how to use the DMCA. Basically, the hardest part of it is finding who hosts the website. And there's a bunch of great tools online, like who is hosting this. Domain Tools, I think, still has one that's going on. There's a bunch of services that can do it for you. But find who the host is. Find out who their DMCA agent is, or their copyright agent is, and then fill out a DMCA template. I've got one on my site. You can also get one from the U.S. Copyright Office. And basically send that to them, and you're much, much, much more likely to see the site come down, the work come down that way. That has been far, far, far more effective, because the web hosts don't want to take liability for whatever random idiot is copying and pasting all your stuff. They don't want to go to court over that. So they're going to, they're going to comply. They're going to meet the requirements of the law. That's been my experience. Else, and things get a little difficult if you're dealing with hosts that are in countries, like Russia right now is a big one. They've been extremely uncooperative due to recent events. China is often an issue too, and a lot of Eastern Bloc countries are as well. But in those cases, if you can't get it taken down directly, get it removed from Google. Google has a DMCA form. They actually have a form. Fill it out, get it removed from Google. At least that way, no one else is going to be seeing it when they search for your work.
Right. And I found these infringing sites, especially if they're new, they aren't going to rank well in Google anyway. But that's a good reminder to take it to Google if you're not getting a response from the host.
And Google is sometimes very weird in my experience. Sometimes the brand new site will outrank the old one. And I've never understood. I've seen that happen multiple times, including for my clients. You're right. In general, they're like 99% right, but it's that 1% that really screws things up.
I have used that Google form, and you're reminding me of a mistake. I'll admit, I made a mistake, and I reversed. I put the wrong URL into the fields of what was the original location of the site and which is the infringing site. I basically mistakenly, you've done it too?
Guilty. Yeah. I almost think they do that deliberately, confusingly sometimes, but no, I have done it in the past. I've not done it in a long, long time, but yes, I have done it in the past and had to go back and rescind my DMCA notice against myself.
Yes, there was a process to get it reversed at least.
I have legitimately done that once or twice back in the olden days. Luckily, I don't send that many DMCA notices to Google these days. I usually work with hosts. But whenever I do one with Google, yes, that's something to be very careful of. It is incredibly easy to do. You're not kidding.
Well, thank you for giving me some validation that maybe the page was confusing.
It is.
I wanted to talk about mistakes people make on the internet regarding intellectual property, misunderstanding copyright. One that I've run across is people saying, well, the photo's on the internet, therefore it's free to use. It seems like a huge mistake.
Yeah, that is a huge mistake. And it's actually, these days, incredibly dangerous. That's,
Mhm.
I mean, of all the content that if you're going to play the it's on the internet, it's free to use game, which it is not, don't do
Mhm.
that. But if you're going to play
Mhm.
that game, photos are probably the worst game to play right now because there are tons of companies out there who are literally their sole thing is finding these types of infringements and sending settlement demands. I
Yeah,
mean, I
because
got
the
I
photographers
got
and the
hit
artists. Yeah.
recently
Yeah.
that was in error. Well, it was in error, but I did get hit with one recently. And I work as a DMCA agent on the other side where I receive the notices too, and I get a lot of them there. And of course, there I have to remind them, no, we're the host, not the uploader. You know,
Yeah. Right.
so, but yeah, if you're going to take images off the internet, especially stock photos that people license, yeah, expect at some point it come back to bite you because just because something is free on the internet does not mean it isn't copyright protected, and it doesn't mean that the owner isn't looking for it and won't take enforcement action over it.
Right.
People have gotten, like I said, things have gotten very aggressive on that front right
Mhm.
now. There are a lot of companies, especially for photos, but also for videos and audio, that are
Mhm.
actively seeking these cases because they can sometimes be easy ways to get settlements out of people.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. Please don't do that. My
Yeah.
advice is go to free stock. If you need a free photo, there are free stock photo sites out there that are legitimate.
Yep.
Go to those, please. They are not I was about to say Pirate Bay, but Pixabay. Pirate Bay is not legal.
Pixabay.
Pixabay
No.
Pixabay is legal. But no, it's the P-Bay thing. But anyways, like that is a good example of a legit one. Go there and use their photos
Mhm.
rather than using just whatever random thing you found on the internet. There's plenty of places where you can find legally licensed content to use.
Yeah.
So grabbing something random off the internet is just a terrible idea.
Right. And yeah, I made a mistake, and this was more of a technical mistake on my part. So within my blog, I had been using Pixabay and another service, and a lot of these license images under Creative Commons
Mm.
rules of various types of free to use with attribution. And I think I was even using a WordPress plugin that automated some of that attribution. It would be in the bottom of the post, giving credit, linking to the artist.
Mhm.
Everything was fine. But I think I think in this case, the only thing I can figure is in editing the post at some point, I accidentally deleted the attribution. And boy,
Mm.
they came after me both barrels for this
Wow.
little image that was completely inconsequential um, to the post. Now, one thing I learned after kind of panicking and trying to figure out what had happened was my business liability insurance is willing to cover that or take that on or kind of push back and offer some sort of settlement. So I don't know what that means for my future insurance rates, but in that incident where I think it was a pretty honest mistake on my part, that was
Yeah.
certainly not a legal excuse.
Yeah, I mean, and I've kind of really soured on using Creative Commons images
Mm-hmm.
because there has been that type of campaign where people have been very aggressively going after well-intended but mistaken use. And there was one case in which like I think it was a college newspaper accidentally formatted out or omitted some of the information from the attribution, and they ended up getting one of those settlement letters. If you're going to use Creative Commons images, definitely use a plugin like you described. It automates the attribution, or go to Wikimedia Commons. That's where Wikipedia basically stores all of its image stuff. So everything in there, more or less, should be Creative Commons of some stripe or another. So obviously, read the license and ensure
Mm-hmm.
that. But one of the great things about it is it provides the HTML code for the attribution. To use this photo on the web, just click it, get the code, and drop it in. It's
Yeah.
much easier than trying to figure out how to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It guarantees you got all the elements that are required. But yeah, there's been a lot of that increasing pushback. People who have done the best they can, well intentioned, using Creative Commons stuff or otherwise open licensed, and not completing some technical issue of it and getting nasty grams. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that, so I sort of stopped going that way.
Right. Right. And then we may have podcasters listening. People often want to use music for like some sort of, intro music or sound effects. So I was wondering if you could talk through the difference between free and royalty free, because that's an important distinction, right?
Yeah. Royalty free simply means that once you pay the license for it, you pay a one-time license and you can use it forever. That's basically yours to use as many podcasts as you want. If you got 257 episodes of a podcast, looking at you,
Yeah.
you can use it in all 257 episodes. You don't need to pay it for another royalty. You don't need to do any accounting. Free means actually, in this case, monetarily free. You're free to download it, but you may not be free to actually use it in the, in the podcast.
Yeah.
You may be free to download it, you may be free to play it, you may be free to listen to it. It depends on the specific license that quote unquote free work is under.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, royalty free just means that you have to pay for it, but you only pay for it once. You don't have to pay for it again and again and again.
Yeah. But it seems like a mistake for someone to say, well, I was able to freely download that, therefore I must be able to use it. Like,
Right.
not necessarily.
It depends entirely upon the exact license that freely downloadable thing is under.
Yeah.
And like I actually run into this with my haunted house, is that we use sound effects and music backgrounds and things like that for it. And we have to be very, very careful, even though we're a nonprofit haunt. We are very careful to only get things that are free for that specific use.
Okay.
The things were free, things are quote unquote free for use on the web, but not in the physical space, for example.
Or
So
public exhibition, or whatever the language is.
Exactly. Right? So you pay very special attention to the license, whatever work you're looking to use is under, and comply with that license is what I always say.
Okay. So I feel like we've buried the lead of, you run a haunted house. That could have been a whole episode of its own for Halloween times.
Yeah. Well, it's a small home/charity haunt. It's about 625 square feet, and we get about 1,000 people through every year. So it's a lot of fun, but it definitely makes October very, very interesting and very exhausting.
Yeah. Are there any mistakes that have happened in the haunted house realm of something being too scary, or like what somebody slips and falls when they're in the haunted house?
We have made some mistakes there. One thing we did is, one of the issues we've always had was people running. We're a small haunt. If you run through our haunt, you're in and out in 30 seconds, so you don't get to see it. So we devised a way to slow things down. And what we did is we used, we saw a meat locker scene in a movie or another haunt. I don't remember which it was. And we're like, let's replicate that. And we did it using fake body bags, not stopping and thinking about the cultural implications of that, and immediately stopped doing that ever again. We just didn't think about it, and we felt like complete idiots after someone pointed it out to us. So yeah, we've made some mistakes there, and a lot of correcting those types of mistakes is just being willing to listen. When someone comes at you with good intentions, saying, hey, this could be offensive, this could be too scary, too on the nose, you go, okay, thank you for telling us. You don't get defensive. A lot of people would have gotten defensive there, and luckily our reaction is always, thank you for telling us, we will make adjustments.
Right. Yeah, because I think trying to tell someone you shouldn't be offended by that doesn't work. That's not cool. Yeah. So I'm glad you listened to that feedback. Now, is there overlap in your worlds of intellectual property and haunted houses, or do people share? Is there kind of this spirit of like, hey, as long as you're not competing directly with me, we're going to share ideas or copy each other?
The biggest issue, copyright standpoint, is that a lot of haunts, including very, very big ones, will use characters from movies, and you'll see Jason, you'll see Freddy, you'll see Pinhead, you'll see on down the line. Like right now, Art the Clown from the Terrifier series is really big. Pennywise was really big a few years back, and you don't own those characters, and you can't recreate them. Now, haunts don't usually see legal trouble. I don't really think the movie studios are looking to pick a fight, but you have to be really, really careful about using anything like that in your advertising.
Sure.
Because when you're doing promotion and putting it out there, that's when you can really draw the attention. One guy in the haunt industry, this was admittedly an ancient haunt, it was like in the 80s or something. He was going to do an all Freddy haunt.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to have, as he put it, tall Freddys, lady Freddys, fat Freddys, thin Freddys, every kind of Freddy he could come up with. He was going to have them, and he was going crazy with it. He started promoting it, and the movie studio came and said, "No, just no, you're not doing that. Just no." So apparently you can cross the line and still get told no, but it takes a lot.
Yeah.
But still, I tell people, come up with your own stories. Those are better and scarier anyways. Or use local legends. Local legends can be a lot of fun to build off on a haunt. I mean, I live in New Orleans, man. We have so many scary stories based in there. We do our stories based upon local history.
Yeah.
We'll take something that happened and then do a spin on it and take it into fiction town. But that way you have that little kernel of truth that everyone kind of knows is there. And A, that keeps us out of copyright trouble, definitely. But B, it also really just feels like much more creative. It feels more like it's ours than recreating, whatever you saw in the latest Freddy or Jason film.
Yeah. So this is going to be an awful joke. I'm going to say it anyway. So don't create a legal nightmare on whatever street your haunted house is on.
Yeah, probably was.
Well, so Jonathan, again, our guest is Jonathan Bailey, plagiarismtoday.com. I wanted to ask you, and this is, and I've reached out so the listener knows. I know Jonathan remembers that I've every couple of years, it seems like I've got some sort of question, reach out to him, and he's given really, good advice. Like, one time I saw, a company was promoting a conference using what seemed like fake LinkedIn profiles with photos that had been clearly stolen from real individuals. That was one interesting to get Jonathan's perspective on.
Yeah.
They stopped doing that.
Okay.
But the principle of it, I guess. Maybe it wasn't.
I remember it happening, but I didn't remember the outcome. So thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really my fight to pick, but it was in my industry, and
totally, I get that.
Couldn't help making a stink about that. But the thing that I've seen more recently, and it kind of made me reach out to you again more recently, is on LinkedIn. I've seen a lot of cases where people are getting a lot of engagement out of basically stolen videos, stolen PDFs. Even sometimes these PDF documents have somebody else's contact information down at the bottom, and I'm just kind of frustrating to see. Like, hey, come on, you should be creating your own content.
Well, and the sad part about it is that this is LinkedIn's fault.
Mm-hmm.
This is 100% LinkedIn's fault. And because we went through something similar with this and are still technically going through with it with Facebook a few years back. There was a whole problem where people were downloading or ripping YouTube videos and uploading them onto Facebook. And the reason they were doing that is because if you post a YouTube link to Facebook, Facebook doesn't put it out there. The algorithm tanks it. But if you upload it to Facebook, then it actually gets engagement. Yes. And if you're a YouTuber who doesn't want to divide your audience, especially since Facebook isn't paying, they're literally paying an exposure for back then, especially. I think they've changed that now, but so there was a whole problem. It was basically a whole problem with people jacking. I think they called it video jacking. Filmed movies, videos from Facebook, YouTube, and uploading Facebook. And now it seems like we're seeing the same thing with LinkedIn. Yeah. Which is I've noticed this myself when I post a link to an article on Plagiarism Today or whatever on LinkedIn, it gets seen by a few people, but not super many. I might get a few likes, a few reacts. Yeah. But if I post the entire article in there, then it will get the attention. But then I risk splitting my audience and causing search engine issues too. Yeah. So I don't do that. I did it a few times as an experiment, but I don't do it like regularly. Right. But yeah, that's LinkedIn rewarding people unintentionally for committing copyright infringement. I don't think that's LinkedIn's goal, but it's what ends up happening. Right.
And every time I upload a video to YouTube, it says it's at least going through the motions of checking for infringement. And I don't know if that's a technology Microsoft and LinkedIn would need to license from someone or develop, or it seems like a use for AI.
We have it is the thing that kind of kills me. they likely do have it. But yeah, they might have. The thing is, the technology for spotting video isn't that difficult. The issue is getting the database to match against.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with YouTube, they're primarily focused on keeping their large content partners happy. They want to keep the movie studios happy so they can keep renting films. They
Yeah.
want to keep TV providers happy because they run YouTube TV.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have all this motivation to keep those big content players and traditional media happy.
Yeah.
So really what the target of that is, any benefit copyright related for us, so to speak, is unintentional, we'll say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the technology exists, and I'm sure that there are companies and services they could talk to or use. It's just I think with LinkedIn right now, the motivation isn't there. There's no incentive for them to chase that down and spend that money and spend that time.
Yeah. And the defense that some will give, if I've seen someone do that to my content or do that to content of someone I know, it's not a good defense to say, well, I cited them.
Yeah.
You know, I've told the audience who I stole the content from. That doesn't make it okay.
And this speaks to, I mean, so like I said, at the very beginning, we talked about plagiarism and copyright and the differences and the overlaps. This sits completely in the copyright side of things. Because yes, you cited it. Congratulations, you didn't plagiarize it, but you did commit copyright infringement because you unlawfully copied and distributed my article, my movie, my whatever, without my permission. And so, the citation doesn't really have anything to do with it. And the other excuse I get that's related to that is, oh, I was just helping give it exposure.
Right.
Right. Like, no, exposure be giving me a link so I can get the people on my site and possibly get my newsletter or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Well, if people want to give exposure, there's the LinkedIn repost function, which is totally fine. Or commenting or liking, or those give exposure.
Yeah, and Facebook has the share button. Threads has the I forgot what that is called button. I'm still trying to figure that one out. And obviously the Twitter or X or whatever, I forget. I can't keep track of this, but they have the repost button.
Yeah.
Which all that is great. That is fine. That is wonderful. Because like you said, it not only is allowed, by posting it on these platforms, I'm encouraging and even allowing this use, but also it ensures the attribution remains intact and everything comes right back to the source.
Right. And this seems to be a problem. I see people complain about this on Threads, that an original post does really well, and then people will copy and paste those words instead of reposting. So I don't spend a lot of time on Threads, but there's times where I'm like, well, I feel like I've seen this exact same thing 5 times. And people complain to the head of Threads, and they don't have that sorted out yet either.
No, Threads is still the baby. I have not spent much time there either. I post there, so I have a presence there. You can follow me there, buddy. I don't engage there very much right now.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fun conversation. Jonathan Bailey, again, our guest. Go visit his website. There'll be links in the show notes, plagiarismtoday.com and Copybyte. As Jonathan mentioned, right in the menu of plagiarismtoday.com, there's a lot of helpful tips of what you could do if you've been plagiarized. There are templates and all kinds of things that you can use. So, thank you for allowing me to, throw a scenario at you every couple of years. Thank you for always being very helpful, and thanks for being a great guest today.
It's been good talking to you, and it's good to reminisce about the WordPress conferences of yesteryear. Those were some great times.
That was 2010, 2011, somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was around 2010. Yeah. It was 2008 to 2010 were the years everything was going down there. So, yeah.
Well, good. So, really happy to reconnect with you, and it's been a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your story, your mistakes, how it's turned out, and all the great tips that you've shared.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Great. Thanks.